That was my big push with troops, was getting to a point where we're pushing insights versus pulling. So we're pushing you the next steps you have to get ready for this week, or we're pushing you the pipeline ops that you should be caring about and pushing forward, instead of just giving you a flat report and letting you try to figure out where should you prioritize or what should you be doing on the report. My path is definitely, I'd say my early path is what has given me my most background for what I still follow in how I manage my teams. But I was a marketing undergrad with a IT minor. I've always been into technology. I just knew I wasn't going to be a developer. So I bumped my computer science and moved to IT minor, and learned more of the basics of how the databases are structured, talk to each other, some data analytic type stuff. And then I was really into marketing, or wanted to do like something more sexy, like entertainment management or something of that nature. I went to a school that didn't have any, they were a school that was really heavy finance and accounting. So they didn't have anything that was really niche around marketing or management per se. It was more general business. So I had a lot of good general business background from the school anyways. But I decided to do a 5th year and do my MBA right away. So I'd say that's what molded my operations mindset. In that MBA course, I needed to pay for that and my apartment, so I needed a job. And I was doing the full-time MBA at night and wasn't getting successful career opportunities set up right out of graduating. 2009, to date myself, was a really slow, like it wasn't a great time for hiring. And there was nothing that like really screamed at me what I wanted to be doing. And so I took this contractor position just to literally pay for school and my rent, which is supposed to be 8 weeks. I was working at a company called Gomez, which did web application performance management. So kind of like how fast are the different images and content on your site loading, and where are the lags, and how do you optimize all that. And it was on the sales ops team helping out the woman who managed sales ops, and then a woman that worked for her that was running their sales force. And what I needed to do over 8 weeks was literally transfer files from one intranet to their new intranet. And because I had some basic like HTML, I was meant to like make it more attractive to look at and use. And I was like, okay, I finished that in like 2 weeks. So I still had another 6 weeks of this contract. So they started feeding me into Salesforce knowledge. Literally like data loader stuff, data cleanliness, lead loading for blitz days for the sales team. And I started to just drink the juice, I guess, pretty quickly. And I was constantly learning something new every day, which kept me motivated, even though I was doing really like crappy data jobs. But I was learning, I was making mistakes. I was learning why I made the mistakes and how to not do that. And I learned a lot of the power of data integrity throughout that process, which I still carry with me today. And then I also took a 6 Sigma class during my MBA. So this was all happening at the same time. And I fell in love with like process mapping and finding holes and understanding the cross-functional alignment to make a process end-to-end function as intended and have the outcome you want. So that's how what I've taken with me throughout my career, which I do think makes me a little bit more unique than a classic sales ops path. I did come up in sales ops, but I've always had more of I also took some entrepreneurial classes and did more general business management. So I've always had an eye on the end to end. So like business ops is more where a lot of my passions have formed. So like integrations with internal databases, and how are we not just aligning sales, CS, AMs, but support into that, because they're all integral parts of making sure you have enjoyable and successful customer experience, right?
Yeah. Danielle, that's an awesome story because it actually fits really well into a narrative we have about sales and RevOps in general, right? And we can disagree with this, but to present it, it's that sales and RevOps that's gone from a backroom function kind of data junkies, and now they're kind of taking more of a forefront in the business. They're helping, for example, like we're talking about, aligning different revenue teams. Is that a narrative you agree with? And what have you seen change then since you started back in 2009?
I would totally agree with that. And maybe just because of my past, I've become more of the systems process integrations person, and hired out more like your classic sales ops analytics type roles, because that stuff I was super passionate about, I think, early on. And then I realized a lot of that power comes from learning the architecture and how are you, not just like what are you doing with the data, but how are you getting the data in and what is the story it's supposed to be telling. So I definitely would agree with that on my path. I kind of just went off track. What was the second part of that question?
Oh, it's just really on is it true? How do you reflect on this story we have about sales ops, rev ops folks becoming less of a backroom function, more of a leading strategic piece in the org?
Yeah, and it's also trying to make that a proactive, right? Like trying to put in front of your CRO or COO theories that they might not have thought about yet. So like things that I tend to do, like last January, we started talking about really finalizing our customer journey. We didn't really have the final stages or definitions of what those stages would be, but that was a project I was taking on. So I started building components into account and opportunity process builders that would start to help classify accounts throughout the stages, knowing we weren't finalized with the stages or definitions, but starting to put some of the foundational aspects down for when we were ready to move fast and have definitions ready to go. So being able to own that conversation more than sit back and kind of take instruction, I was able to be more proactive than reactive. Where I think that's the shift I think I've seen in people that stay in operations and become successful in that.
Yeah, you define it really well, Danielle, being more proactive than reactive. It's kind of like less insight gatherers and more insight just givers, right?
Yeah, and that was my big push with troops, was getting to a point where we're pushing insights versus pulling. So we're pushing you the next steps you have to get ready for this week, or we're pushing you the pipeline ops that you should be caring about and pushing forward, instead of just giving you a flat report and letting you try to figure out where should you prioritize or what should you be doing on the report. So we're pushing you that stuff, then you're pushing that insight back to your managers, back to us, rather than like your managers tracking you down the Tuesday before a pipeline meeting, trying to pull all that out of you, wasting your one-on-one time, just talking about story time. And now you're actually having coaching conversations versus story time, I guess. But yeah, push versus pull.
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up a good point there, which is prioritization. Lots of people, they want to become more proactive. They want to stop putting out the fires, but that's kind of a piece of work, right? Like that's a process you have to go through to get there. So in your mind, like what's the priority to push onto sales reps, managers? What are the kind of key metrics, key insights, key dashboards they really need to be aware of in your view?
I think you have to focus on, so I've always done sales ops and always in tech, but very different industries. So I've had to do a lot of discovery when I first started a company to understand what those are. Like I would say, sales cycle, your classic sales ops type reporting doesn't always cookie cutter into every company. Like when I came into Zappy, we were shifting to more of an account based. They never had a big lead culture. So we're trying to introduce like MQLs, and we're just learning like your classic lead funnel doesn't actually make a valuable impact at this company with our sales structure and our approach to selling. Whereas having something more like an account-based score would be more impactful for helping a rep understand who they should be outbounding versus who they probably should wait for marketing to warm up some more. And we don't have a BDR team that's, you know, we're not doing a bunch of marketing, bringing in thousands of leads. So, you know, we have a tight lead process now, but it's not the end all be all that most new business teams, I feel like, really run on. But we still need a way to get them something like an MQL, right? So something we're working on, like, how do we prioritize based on our ICP attributes and whatnot? Also being able to roll up a lot of that engagement with marketing or outreach that sales might be doing and give that kind of like ready to talk score almost, you know? So I guess, yeah, that's kind of talking around the question, but my point is more, I don't think I've ever brought the same exact metric to every single company and had it be something that always resonated. I will say, like, something I'm passionate about, and probably from my experience at Invaluable, getting it kind of like shoved down my throat at first. I hated it when I was doing it. And then once you get to the end point, you just see how impactful and just eye-opening it can be. But finding a really strong way to capture activity metrics in the fact of where are your reps spending the most time, I think is a really helpful management tool that, like, it hasn't totally landed at Zappy, largely because we lost one of our managers last year and didn't rehire. So we had the head of sales trying to like manage 3 teams essentially himself, which is like way too many people to manage. So there just wasn't a lot of that engagement around it, but this year it will come back around, and it's, especially in a remote world, it's like, what are you doing with your time? Where are you spending your time? And not necessarily like Big Brother, but starting to tie time spent on value add selling activities to target achievement or pipeline build or whatnot, right? Starting to connect those dots can help you become a better manager on where you're coaching your teams. So not just like Big Brother, you know, I see you only worked for 6 hours, not 8 hours today, right? Like, but hey, you were really value add selling activities for solid 2 hours this morning, but it was all emails and you didn't drive any discovery meetings. Whereas this person interjected, you know, calling into their flow and they drove 2 discovery meetings. That's just like pulling numbers out of my head, but starting to tie those together, I think, is something that every sales org should be keeping a pulse on.
Yeah, Danielle, that's a good one actually, because what that comes back to is what we said earlier about how we want to be adding value and insight to reps with data. But before that, you actually said something else that was quite interesting. And that's that, you know, I asked, you know, what the core metrics, and you said basically it depends on the context, right? And that's so true. Like, data is so different depending on the context it's in. And that's because so much of analyzing data can be a kind of a human sport, right? We can all have 3 different impressions from data depending on who we are and where we come from. So talk to me about aligning perspectives on data. How do we align what people think about the data and that whole bloody like challenge, which is never going to be perfect?
I'm laughing because I just got off my bi-weekly with our head of BI.
Yeah.
On this very topic.
Yeah, right.
We introduced segmentation last year. Yeah. And it's one of those, to your point, like, depending on who you ask, you get a different definition. Even though we have a company definition, you get a different flavor of what we mean between premium and enterprise. And so now we want to add retention metrics on these segmentations, but now we're into that, like, okay, well, what if someone went from premium to enterprise, but we had them under an enterprise account structure, but they were you know, like, it gets into I think the best way we've approached that is a mix of async and in Zoom meeting. But first of all, just getting really clear, agreed upon company definitions, understanding where the holes or confusion might be on the stakeholders that are in charge of actually disseminating that down. So like, we had BI in the room, we had our CFO in the room, our CRO in the room, and our CEO in the room as the high level executives that need to be able to confidently talk about this at a board level or a fundraising level. And then having our head of customer and some sales and myself in the room around how do we actually systematize this in a way that matches the company definition so that there are less questions or less flavors around what an enterprise versus premium is. Because first the definition process, and then systematizing it kind of gives you actually our COO said this once to me, and it like really stuck, and I'm gonna get the words probably wrong, but it's really powerful when he said it. But it was essentially if you're asking someone to follow a process, you need to give them one defined process. You can't give them several paths or you'll never get to the same outcome. So if we're gonna go down one process path, we need to make sure that covers all our bases and we don't have any confusion when rolling that out, or how the system is guardrailing it so that someone could go around the process and end up with a different outcome and whatnot. I don't know. He said it a lot more powerful than what I just said, but essentially, like, if you're going to give someone a way to create an opportunity, for say, give them one way to create the opportunity versus 4 different choices, because the 4 different choices are going to get you 4 different opportunities. And that's actually something that, like, I actually got in a internal scuffle around that exact piece of, we want reps to create opportunities from the contact, because there's actually systematic benefits of doing that. You have the primary campaign that feeds back to marketing. You know, you don't have to go and add the contact at the last minute when you just want to close, win, and celebrate. We can actually start to track pipeline to person versus company. Like, there's a lot of business wins to doing that way. And it also saves steps for the rep at the end of the day. And I had an admin that was like, but what if we could give them like 3 different ways to create the opportunity that fits, you know, if this person likes to do it this way and that person likes to do it that way. I was like, you're never going to please everyone.
Yeah. And
especially when you give more and more options. I mean, there's definitely exceptions where, like, you have several ways to get to the end point, but if you give people a lot of different options, A, they're never going to consistently follow the process. B, you're never going to have consistent output across and you're going to add confusion level to the process. So it may be uncomfortable for the 2 people that don't like creating an opportunity that way at first, but the more they do it, it becomes DNA. We have the same thing going with our support team. We brought them onto Service Cloud this year, and they're a big decision by committee type of team. And so one person wanted to do something one way, another one wanted to do it a completely different way, and the rest of the group was fine doing it the best practice way. You know, and it was like, hey, can I get a different profile just so I can do it this way? And it's like, no, help me understand what's wrong with the way we're asking you. Like, it's not just no, but help me understand, right? Help me understand why it's uncomfortable. Help me understand what we might be missing with this, right? Like, maybe we're missing a data point, and the way you're doing it captures that. Maybe we think this is the most efficient process, but you actually uncovered a way to do it a little quicker. How can we incorporate that? So, yeah, long-winded answer.
No, it's superb. And it actually speaks very true for people in startups who are trying to find what's this robust system where we can just scale and do it well and do it properly. And that's really fantastic. Now, for you, Danielle, if you were in a room full of sales RevOps heroes, the very best, what would you want to ask them?
That's a good question. Do you want to do a startup that pulls all these disparate tools together into one? I think that's the one question I always come up with as a joke. If you always have, if you put that many people in, you tend to get I've been trying to solve this problem, there's this tool to do it, and you end up with 10 tools. There's actually I know Kluster is trying to solve that problem a bit. With insights, right? Like, trying to pull together, if I'm remembering it correctly. Yeah, I don't know, actually. That's kind of one that stumps me. As curious as I am, I feel like
It's almost too good of an opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess how do you drive more accountability?
Yeah.
Because no matter how much you get reps to adopt a process, you need to get managers to stay on top of that to drive accountability and continue the adoption of the process. Because you can adopt a process, it's something that sustains for a quarter or two, but if the manager's never checking in on it, questioning it, asking about it, you're going to lose adoption. You're going to get churn on the excitement around it and the proper steps in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's classic, where everyone gets very excited at the beginning, and then quarter, 2 quarters, they kind of regress back to the norm.
How do you drive accountability when your role isn't to drive accountability?
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Well, Danielle, day, you can't be their manager.
No, you can't be. And also, you don't want to put yourself in the position where you're just whacking people with big sticks and being very annoying all the time. No one likes that. Yeah. Well, Danielle, you did mention Kluster there. I know you've just bought a new tool, some of which are similar to things we do. But what's your thinking and like current understanding of what we do and how helpful you might think that would be for you right now?
I honestly haven't looked at Kluster lately. I actually felt dated in my operation RevOps mindset the other day. My head of growth was talking about wanting to turn Pardot, which I like Pardot to bring in for someone who's never had marketing automation, because it's very easy to get up to speed on, and it does the basics. It's more when you get into more advanced marketing automation, you grow out of it.
Yeah.
I don't think we've necessarily grown out of it. I think the person we have adminning it is a data scientist career path. So he's overcomplicating things, like even lead scoring. He described his because right now we're doing MQLs based on hand raises only. Yeah. So we need to get into actual lead scoring. We have a year of hand raise MQLs to see these are what we considered really hot leads. Are there other leads that we probably should have considered based on lead scoring, based on high engagement with marketing materials or campaigns? Yeah. So in doing that, he had this highly complicated structure of like, okay, over 30 days, if you do these 5 things, but in 30 days, you only do 4 of those. I want to remove the points for that 5th thing, but just that 5th, like, I was like, no, Pardot's not going to do that. You'd have to build a data model. And, and that's not necessarily, I go, the fact that we don't even have scoring, it's really easy to overcomplicate, but actually starting in a more simple scoring process and model with the tools we have, we'll learn quickly what's working or not, and if we need to add a level of complication like that. So anyways, that was a long-winded. So he's talking about moving away from Pardot, and I was like, honestly, I don't know what I would move to right now. I feel very dated in my technology background right now and like marketing automation. For some reason, Kluster came into my mind, which is why I'm telling you this story. I don't know why it came into my mind talking about marketing automation, because you guys are more around like the RevOps, like surfacing data that matters, right? No?
Yeah. You actually almost remembered our...
Yeah. But yeah, I was like, I would have to actually go back and relearn the marketing automation space.
Yeah. So hard in tech.
Marketo is ancient. Like a lot of people churn Pardot for Marketo.
Yeah.
And I actually did that at Huddle, and it was like, it's like it never matured as the marketing automation space matured. Yeah. It looks like Salesforce Classic. It doesn't integrate well with Salesforce. It's very clunky, and you end up paying for all these additions that get you what you actually want. And then Eloqua, I was like, honestly, from what I remember, the way you work, Chris, Eloqua might be a good fit for us in the fact that like you want to build out all these SQL and models out, and Eloqua allows for a lot of that. Anyways, but I could talk all day about that space, but
yeah, I mean, it's the trouble with SaaS is like in no time at all things are so different. Like in the tool itself, and in like how business has actually moved on as well. It's complicated. Okay, well, like you said, we are more in really the forecasting reporting space. Really, it's the data insights from sales teams. Your piece about accountability, we typically find, as you said at the beginning, you start getting accountability, you start getting reps following process when they get something added from that. And what Kluster likes to help reps do is to kind of treat their own book of business like a CEO, and actually give managers insight into that through a pretty cool rep insight and opportunity rep insight engine. And that's something you wouldn't have seen with us because it's actually fairly new. Like I said, everything changes at like a mental speed. So I'd like to show it to you, but how does that sound for you, Danielle?
I would be interested. I actually just looked at Box Step yesterday, which was the one I mentioned. I just looked at something that was trying to combine a lot of the different tools.
Yeah.
It looks like they're doing a little bit of what Gong is doing with their deal reviews and risk triggers. Have you seen that? Like telling you it's a single threaded opportunity. You probably want to add more to the buying team.
Yeah.
It brings together that account planning, mutual agree upon action plans, and like win-loss analysis. So, but my feeling on that was like, it's the right direction and it looks very easy to use, but it's still a ton of data entry on the reps. And the reps still have to actually create everything in Salesforce and then go into the system to manage it. So you're breaking the process. It's not a fluid, I do this and then I do that type of process. So
yeah, understood. I mean, what you ideally want is something that kind of combines things with a simple process that doesn't really take loads of time out of a rep's day. That would be like the golden standard of a tool right now in the RevOps space.
Yeah, that's what I meant by like, that's what I'd ask. Who wants to team up and create what Salesforce went out to build, and then they ended up just doing it through their partner ecosystem. So now we have a stack of 12 tools that I have to keep remembering to, like, we just had a new rep start Monday and I was like, shit, I forgot to give them this license.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a checklist.
Yeah, no, understood. Okay, Daniel, well, how would you feel about looking at Kluster?
I would definitely take another look at it. Priority wise here at Zappy, we're looking at bringing in an LMS this quarter and getting that off the ground, as well as getting just like the new sales account structures, dashboards and whatnot ready. So like this month I'm totally data tactical centric.
Yeah.
And then February, I'll come up for air a little bit more on like strategic stuff. And then Q2 is probably where it would be more like focus. So sometime in like February.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. We can do February. I mean, months go insanely quickly.
Really fast.
Silly fast. Yeah. I mean, so why should we put in a placeholder then? And if we need to move it, we can.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. We can do pretty much like the same time and space as we're doing right now, but just in February.
Yeah,
if that generally works well for you.
Yeah. What about like February 11th?
Yeah, let's do it. Do it.
Nice. And I have the full hour, 11 to, actually that day is, I only have 2 meetings in the afternoon.
Class. Yeah, class. All right, that sounds good.
Do the morning that day.
Sorry?
If you wanted to do earlier in your day, because I know you're at the end of your day.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Don't worry. We work all hours because America's where it's at, so don't worry about it.
I know. I feel so. That's the other thing I would say is about alignment. Remembering, I mean, we're all remote now, so it's a little easier, but remembering our EMEA teams, like the head of sales in EMEA always feels like he's left out. So like making a conscious effort to always include all teams in conversations and demos. Like if demos are I'm always using the same US rep or, talking to the same reps, it can make, people across the pond a little bit feel isolated.
Imagine you could get a bit of FOMO, right? Because when you shut your laptop down, if you're one of those people, it's all still happening. You're like, oh, what's going on? What am I missing out right now that I want to hear about? Like, yeah, for sure.
And that's and we've built out a lot of the decisions we make for the revenue side are from the US teams because US is where our biggest market is. So we strategically built our revenue hub in Boston. time zone wise, and to be in the US. So it is a tough thing, but that's something I've carried also, like learning the hard way of making your remote or not in office people feel isolated without even meaning to. It's just like I said, like constantly using the same US rep or America's reporting or USD, because we actually, our company runs on GBP because we're out of
Was
London.
it?
Yeah, so,
Interesting.
but the US still looks at a lot of their dashboards in USD.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's funny, based in London, but it sounds like really the de facto capital is probably more like a Boston, and it's more like the States.
Yeah, and yeah, that is really, although our head of, we're gonna hire a global head of operations. That's another thing that talking about, and I know we're way over, but I just canceled mine. I don't know if you have something right now. I ended up
don't worry.
11:30 after making it.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry.
I feel honored. I feel honored.
No, we only have to talk about lead scoring, and we have
Yeah.
a catch up every Tuesday morning. So
Yeah.
this is like my one-on-one with the manager.
Yeah, right.
We're not talking about anything different than what the rest of the team will offer. Anyways, but talking about how sales ops has shifted. Obviously, rev ops is a huge buzz term where most rev ops people are still just sales ops people. I would argue.
Yeah.
Even myself, I mean, I'm bringing a lot more customer success operations into the role. But in marketing, I've become more of like an internal consultant than owning marketing operations as a revenue ops leader. And in this year, we're actually hiring a global head of operations. So like a COO level that I'll end up actually rolling into the COO instead of the CRO, which will be interesting.
Interesting.
It's an approach where we've kind of, we pillared out operations, and a lot of people have this I had the same conversation at my previous company, Huddle, and it's kind of one of those, do you centralize operations with specialties, or do you have more of like an operations council, but keep them in their pillars under their like rev ops under CRO?
Yeah.
And what we're betting on by consolidating and having a centralized operations function is I'll still be specialized around the revenue side of things, systems integrations, but we'll have more tech to business integration if you have the same management structure over your tech operations, biz operations, rev operations. So you drive more alignment versus silos. Because what we found, we tried the operating council, and what we found was we were still, like I was still serving the revenue team needs, which aligned to a degree with what product ops might have been doing, or we have like an internal biz ops that helps with integration, but like at the end of the day, they still were going against their roadmaps, and you know, having one manager to align all of those. So like I need user metrics into Salesforce. To me, that seems like a project worthwhile and not a heavy lifting from a developer standpoint if I could get some developer time on it. That being said, getting the developer time and aligned on that is where I've struggled, because my priorities around the CRO, theirs are around the engineering world. So it's, you know, they're like, well, I need to do these things for this OKR, maybe next quarter. Whereas if one head of ops is running all the OKRs, then we're all kind of singing the same song, I guess.